Before I take you any further into this discussion, you may want to go back and watch the video I did on the emotional relationship of addiction. I'll link it for you in the description. In that video, I introduced an idea that I think is super important when looking at the mechanisms of addiction. In it, I talk about the internal world and how that world is projected and becomes addiction. I'm talking about our anima, and it's not something mystical or theoretical. It's actually a very practical thing. Your anima is your inner emotional life. It's how you feel, regulate stress, process pain, experience meaning, and stay connected to yourself. These archetypes were introduced by Carl Jung to express the internal working models for all humans. And in traditional psychoanalytic thought, the anima is the internalized feminine for men, and the animus is the internalized masculine for women. Some will argue that these archetypes are not experienced outside of their respective genders, but more modern practitioners of this approach would argue otherwise. So for the purpose of this perspective, regardless of your gender, we are going with anima to describe this phenomenon for everyone. When this inner relationship is underdeveloped or unsafe, people look outside of themselves to manage it. Some people use substances, some people use work, some people use relationships. Addiction happens when something outside of you becomes the main way you manage what's happening inside of you. So when I say a substance becomes an outsourced anima, I mean this: alcohol, drugs, or compulsive behaviors start doing the emotional work the person can't do internally. Yet they calm anxiety, they numb pain, they create relief, they give confidence, and they provide escape. They regulate the person from the outside. Now, here's where this connects directly to relationships. If you've loved someone struggling with addiction, you may have felt like you were competing with the substance. Like no matter how much you showed up, something always pulled them away. And you probably tried to make sense of it by asking yourself hard questions. Like, why do they open up to me and then disappear? Why do they seem close one minute and distant the next? Why does it feel like the addiction matters more than I do? What's happening underneath that pattern is often this: you and the substance are doing the same job. The substance regulates their inner world, and over time, so do you. You listen, you soothe, you stabilize, you absorb their emotions, you help them calm down, you help them feel less alone, and you help them survive their own internal chaos. That means you're not just their partner or their parent or their sibling or their friend. You're part of their emotional regulation system. That's why the relationship can feel so intense and so confusing. When the substance isn't available or isn't working or is creating consequences, they may turn toward you. Suddenly they're present, emotional, reflective, apologetic, and connected. Those moments feel real because they are real. But when the substance becomes available again, or when closeness starts to require responsibility or accountability, the system shifts again. The substance is faster. It doesn't require vulnerability. It doesn't push back. It doesn't reflect their behavior, and it doesn't ask them to grow. So it wins. From the outside, this looks like inconsistency, but from the inside, it feels like being chosen and then abandoned again and again and again. And this is where you might start blaming yourself. You think, maybe if I were more patient, or if I didn't have needs, maybe if I didn't push, or I loved better. But the issue was never that you weren't enough. You were competing with something that required nothing from them. Closeness does. Real intimacy asks someone to reflect, take responsibility, and tolerate another person's reality alongside their own. Substances don't do that. So when the relationship deepens, when you ask for safety, when you need consistency, the system reacts. They may pull away, use more, become irritable, minimize the relationship with you, and rewrite the entire story. That doesn't mean that the bond wasn't real. It means the system couldn't tolerate two regulators at the same time. And this is also why many partners slowly disappear in their relationships with someone who's addicted. To keep the connection, you adapt. You get quieter, you carry more, you manage moods, you anticipate reactions, you become smaller so the relationship can survive. And the more you adapt, the less pressure there is for the other person to develop an inner relationship with themselves, i.e., strengthening their anima. That's the part you don't hear about. Now, from this perspective, recovery isn't about choosing you over the substance. Recovery is about learning how to manage an internal world without outsourcing it. That's why sobriety alone doesn't automatically fix relationships. The substance might be gone, but the emotional work it was doing hasn't been taken back inside yet. It's become part of your relational system, another member of the family that plays a significant role in keeping everyone bonded in some way, even if that was uncomfortable and the opposite of what you wanted. When that happens, the load often shifts fully onto the partner or the parent or the sibling or the friend. Suddenly, you're expected to provide all the regulation, all the reassurance and stability and meaning the substance once did for them. That's why some relationships feel just as unstable, if not more, after sobriety. Real recovery means learning how to feel without escaping, how to regulate without numbing, and how to stay present without outsourcing that work to chemicals or people. And if you were the parent, the partner, the sibling, or the friend in this story, I want to be clear about something. You didn't stay because you were weak, you didn't hope because you were naive, and you weren't competing because you weren't enough. You were inside a system organized around survival, not intimacy. Understanding that doesn't erase the grief, but it does return your clarity, and your clarity is the beginning of your own recovery. Now, in the next episode, I'm going to start turning toward what healing looks like after living inside someone else's emotional world, how you rebuild trust in yourself, reclaim your internal authority, and stop competing for space you were never meant to fight for. If this episode hit home, start by noticing one way you've been carrying someone else's emotional work. Write it down, talk to a trusted friend, or just name it for yourself. Understanding it is the first step toward reclaiming your own inner space. And if you want more, subscribe so you don't miss the next episode where we dive into how to rebuild trust in yourself after being in a relationship like this.